Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, Jade, once again, and today I'm here with a buddy of mine. Say hi, Nick.
Hello, my name's Metanick, also known as Nick.
Yeah,
I don't care either.
yeah, he has been mentioned before. So
Yes,
yeah,
one time.
yeah, one time.
I remember hearing that and I was just like, oh shit.
Yep. So today on the Yoda Zone, because I'm all about the spur of the moment stuff, we're gonna be talking about subs, dubs, translations, and localizations. Um, I guess we'll start with subs and dubs.
Okay. Oh,
The
the classic
yeah,
question,
yeah,
the classic debate in the anime community.
yeah, the classic bullshit argument. Like, oh, what's better, subs or dubs? I'm like, I made an entire video on it that barely anybody watched, but it was still worth it just to get just to get that thought out there. That it was worth every penny. Like, yeah.
Would you say that video is what kind of has spurred you on to want to talk about it more, or is there something else that brought it up?
I
Well, I know one of the reasons why you want to talk about translations, I believe, so.
Oh yeah, like one of the reasons why is because again, is because of the reason why I have localization in the title. Cold Steel 3 or Trails of Cold Steel 3 is getting localized by Nipponichi Software's America or NISA America, and the whole community on that particular like side of the anime video game spear, the type of people who like play a lot of Xseed games and a lot of Falcom stuff like Yeez and again the aforementioned Trails series. They've lost their fucking minds and they're just
That's
going
putting
on.
it
Yeah.
lightly.
Yeah, and they're going on about like, oh, what's gonna happen to like the game? Oh, is it gonna be dead in the West? And there's just so much I have to fucking say about them, man. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, that'll be the good gold grand finale.
Yeah, defs. All right. Well, I guess we'll start with like subs and dubs. So, like Nick, which exactly do you prefer watching? I already know this, but like, just tell the audience.
Yeah. Well, I actually have an interesting history with it because when I first started off watching anime, and I feel like most people will agree with this, is I watched it dubbed. And that's not just because like there is the example of like Pokemon, and being on TV, that's all there was dub and stuff like that.
Mm.
But even when I went out of my way to watch a couple of the shows on my own, like seeking them out, I tended to watch dubs. I don't know if that was just because that was the access to me, and maybe because I just generally have always preferred that.
Mm.
It's that ease of access of just having the English audio and not really thinking about it. Because beforehand, I had watched like some movies here and there with subtitles, but you're just like, kind of so used to it being in English, that's just how it is. But nowadays, I am like pretty much 100% sub. Like I just like listening to it in
Mm.
its native language. Yeah, granted, you can't get like the full gist of like acting because we don't know the language completely, but I
Yeah.
still like it because you can still get a basic feel because I mean like any sort of language and it's supposed to be expressive and you can kind of get
Yeah.
that feel from actors. Um that and some you get kind of more of the native jokes. I'm personally a fan of the Japanese language in terms of how it sounds at times. Even like some of the most mundane stuff sounds kind of funny or cool. um so to me that's kind of what spurs it on. And a lot of times if you want to watch something like as soon as possible, or if you want to watch something with that has a lot of there, it's a lot harder to keep up with it when there's a dub and you have to wait for it to kind of slowly trickle out.
Yeah.
Like pretty much how like manga works or video games.
Yeah.
So to me, I think sticking to that aspect is a bit easier. And just kind of like those are, I would say, the more basic reasons for why I'd say that.
Yeah. So I I'm pretty much the same way. Like I started off with dubs, just doing the same old things, watching Toonami, and then at some point I transitioned over to subs. I say all this in the fucking subs versus dubs video, I
Yeah.
believe, right? And basically at this point, again, just like you, I watch most of my shit with like subs with subtitles and all that. The only time I watch dubs is if I'm watching it with somebody who wants to watch it in dubs, or if it's just funny. Like some
Uh
dubs
huh.
are just fucking hilarious. Like I
Oh
believe
yeah.
I already talked about on Twitter. I already talked about how not to summon a demon lord, and how hilarious the dub for that show is, because of how all the girls talk like they're from fucking California. They have that Valley girl accent. And I thought that was just fucking hilarious for some reason.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do think that's an interesting thing to debate is going in kind of the nitty gritty of dubs and really asking yourself how good quality dubs are. Like,
Mm,
because I'm not trying to say anybody who watches dubs is wrong or anything, or like if you enjoy a dub, that's perfectly fine.
mm,
But there are a lot of times where I feel like dubs definitely kind of fall in very particular categories. Um, and as much as I enjoy, like Funimation with them being able to bring out dubs,
yeah.
there's always those instances where they just keep using the same actors, and
Yeah.
you'll watch like a couple shows and you'll be like, "Oh hi," like for example, Chris
Johnny Young
Sabat.
Bosch.
"Oh hi, Johnny Young Bosch." Yeah, like you'll hear that, and it'll be really weird to disconnect that. Sometimes I think they do it fine, but other times where it's just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, it's you," so
Yeah.
you
I'll
don't
yeah.
get that more like like specific, like maybe something you wouldn't have like picked up on, like if you were watching it with a sub as opposed to a dub and you're immediately just thinking this other character because that's where you heard it before.
Yeah, like I think the biggest struggle dubs have is just like the lack of like actors to pull from, because normally like with a lot of high budget shows, like let's say anything that's Ghibli, Studio Ghibli, anything they fucking put out, they get
They get big name
yeah, they
actors.
get big actors like, or like Uma Thurman playing characters in fucking Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Like there was
Oh, I didn't even know
yeah,
that.
like Shia LaBeouf played like the male lead in that movie, and I thought that was fucking
Wow.
hilarious. Yeah, for like the dub, and yeah, it was like crazy shit like that, and I thought that was like really interesting and cool, because they can because they have the money, because Disney does all the localization for that stuff, for all the
Yeah.
Ghibli stuff. Disney can just throw money at actors, so they can get big names to come like voice those particular properties. But for like fucking stuff like, again, how not to summon a demon lord, they have no fucking money, so they basically have to like get the same people on board like over and over again, because those are the people who are more like willing to do that kind of stuff and don't need to be paid a huge amount of money for their time.
Yeah. Um what else I was gonna also say, also with dubs too, I think one of the other things that at least I've noticed a lot now when looking back on dubs and watching any newer stuff is and this isn't a fault on any of the actors. It's very hard to work in the limitations of what you get,
Yeah.
but because of how it works of dubbing over something that's not supposed to be in your language, there is this kind of weird disconnect. I don't know if you've ever noticed it in terms of just kind of how you feel characters speak when they do it in English or something like that. Like if you
uh
look at Japanese, like if you watch the original Japanese ones, you can obviously tell they're you doing the language and the animation more connective. I don't know how connected it is, so I'm not going to really say anything like, oh, they're always together, because I honestly can't like say how that is like in my head, but but that they at least have those there, and that's what they probably work around. While here, they don't really plan for that. They're making it for the Japanese audience, and then we just pick it up and decide to use it for ourselves. Um, so like you'll see people like they have to work around cramming in sentences in order to fit in those lip flaps. And a lot of the
Uh,
times there's like characters that are speaking really fast and it comes off as not natural at all. Um,
oh
or
yeah.
they'll like switch tones really weirdly at times. And I think that just kind of messes with the characters and the pace at times. Um, Especially if it's like a really comedy show, or if it's like something that has like a lot of action sometimes, and they have like big dialogue stuff, and they have to like cram all these words in there and things. And
I get
yeah,
what you're saying. Like
yeah,
yeah, I can see that because in my head immediately like certain examples flashed. Like yeah, because they have to like, do that. There's this weird incongruency at times, like depending on like the genre, like you said, like with
it
comedy
really
and
does depend. Yeah,
yeah, like for like I think certain genres, like for example, like certain battle shonens aren't really as heavily affected because
no,
it's like a lot more about presenting the action of like specific scenes, and like a lot of the a lot of times, depending on the series, of course, the really intense moments or like the non-action moments are not really as over the top or edgy, so it's easier to communicate a more in a more straightforward and calm tone.
yeah,
But like with some Japanese comedy, like one of the things is like the really intense over the top nature of it, and
hmm,
it can kind of come off as weird in some in some English dubs, just because of
yeah.
how just because it doesn't feel like the way people would normally like talk in
Oh
English.
God, no. I mean, and I also was just kind of thinking about this too. But it's also, I think, a cultural thing as well. Like
Yeah.
in Japan, there's kind of like this expectation of you see a character, you kind of have an idea of how they'll probably sound, and then they use those voices to match it, or
Yeah.
they'll do like an opposite for a purpose. But here, how like American women or any Western women or guys in general, we have different tones of how we speak, we have different ways of how we pronunciate, we have different like vocal levels. So when you hear like in like a Japanese voice actress doing a female character, you kind of just you think that's just natural. But then there's times where you'll hear like a dub actress or actor or whatever, and then, well, I'm mainly talking about actors here, and then they put their voice in, and because their voice is like definitely in some cases deeper, they sound a lot older than they really probably should. And I feel like sometimes the characters come off as a lot different when that happens.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if you've ever really thought about that, but sometimes I just see that and I'm just like, that just sounds like kind of like a 30-year-old woman in a like teenage body, and it just looks weird. Um, but sometimes, like, it depends on the show, it'll work, but
To
other times
me,
it just doesn't.
like
So
when I hear that, and I've heard this before, I think the only other person I've heard say this is kind of like is Digibro, and yeah, it is a valid thing, and I think this comes from the fact that, again, like I mentioned in my video, you're a lot more used to hearing English, so when you hear like a character speak in that tone, you immediately think, oh, I've heard people like this speak before,
yeah,
and you make the connection that, oh, that sounds like what a 30-year-old woman would sound like, right?
yeah,
But like if you're not used to hearing Japanese spoken like in a in just a casual manner, your immediate assumption when you hear somebody speak, you don't automatically like make that connection because you're just not used to hearing like the tone of voice. And also you have to factor in just again differences in the industry, and the industry in the Japanese side, they just have more people to fucking pull from.
Oh
So
yeah,
yeah, they have the opportunity to get more skilled people, or just people who fit the part better on staff. It's a really, again, so much of the problem comes from just not having the right people to do the job, and just like
yeah.
some some inconsistencies with just the culture of the two, just the weird desynchronizations that happen.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah,
think it also has to do with taste as well.
yeah,
Like a lot of his I mean, honestly, you can look at all of this and just say it's very,
yeah.
it's opinionated, like somebody will obviously be like, "Oh, I don't mind that." And then someone else will be like, "I absolutely hate that."
Mm,
So, it all comes down to taste too. But I do think even regardless, you kind of do have to look at that, and you have to kind of realize that because of, different cultures, because of, we're dubbing it and it's not natural, like this isn't like made to go with it from the
mm,
get-go, there is going to be boundaries and there's going to be differences. And some people prefer just, like watching a show and not having to worry about reading. Some people don't mind that. Just really just depends.
mm.
um so that's why I always think in general the whole debate is really just like, well, I mean, just go with whatever you prefer,
Yeah,
honestly.
exactly. It's all about, it's very personal.
Yeah.
And the and I have, again, like, the various criticisms of, like, of dubs, or just like the different interpretations people have for subs, like I can see both of those as like valid. Like, where I draw the line, and have always drawn the line, is just this weird, again, the tribalistic attitude
Oh yeah.
towards it.
Hmm.
And yeah, like, in a sense you could say that this is just the human nature. People just kind of section off into different little cliques based on like various opinions, but that doesn't mean it's not obnoxious. It's extremely obnoxious, and it's this weird situation that I can't help but I can't help but get like super irritated over every time, because it feels like we've been going at this like whole discussion for like years on end, and like each side has only gotten more militant, because
Hmm.
like when you have like when with the advent of like YouTube anime, personalities, going on about like subs, since most of those guys or gals, no discrimination, right? Most of those people, they're all on the sub train. They've all drunk
Yeah.
the Kool-Aid, and they're completely all in on that, right? And they're just going
Hmm.
with what the popular opinion is, or like a lot of them probably do like personally enjoy subs just like me and Nick, but it's just like a general like, because everybody is saying and thinking the same thing, it just kind of feeds into everybody's opinion, just kind of feeds into each other, and now it just gets strengthened, and nobody feels like they could be second guessing themselves. So now they're like even more aggressive about pushing it, because again, in their minds they're 100% right. So when, some dub watcher shows up, it's like, hey, like, why are you different? Why aren't you watching shit like why aren't you watching it like we do? You know,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's a lot less about like which one's actually better, and more about like the click aspect of it, the
Yeah. I think the
tribalistic
whole issue of it is probably just the idea that there is a sub versus dub to begin
yeah,
with. That's a
exactly.
word. It's like, a statement that people hear. Um and I was also gonna say, like, even though there definitely are groups where, it's either this or that, and you try to do that,
Yeah.
there are also plenty of people out there that I'm I'm hoping like people would be very adamant and admit this, but there's also people out there that just like watch both. They do both whenever they feel like it.
Yeah.
Like I know with me, I'm a primarily sub watcher, but there are a couple of shows that I actually do like dubbed. I watched
Mm.
them dub after I did start to get in subs, and I just kind of for some reason always think about them the dub wise, and I like them. Like a couple examples for me is the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. I like that show dub.
I got you.
Uh, and Lucky Star, because those two shows I always kind of put together because I mean mainly because they're both like Kyoto Annie, and
Yeah,
then
Kyoto
you
and
can
Kid
very tell
Girls.
like Lucky Star is kind of supposed to be a joke off of that time frame when Haruhi is coming out and all that.
Yeah.
Um, and because I watched it Haruhi dubbed, the joke aspect of Konata sounding like Haruhi only really makes sense if I was watching it dubbed there too. So yeah, and what else? I mean, I watched Dragon Ball Z still dubbed. Like,
Yeah, yeah, of course. Of course, DBZ, like I could never watch DBZ in Japanese. I don't know,
yeah, it's just kind of like you immediately think that way.
yeah, it's just so weird to not hear like the typical DBZ cast, like for the English dub voicing, Goku or Vegeta. Like in my head, like those guys are those characters. Like
Yeah, I will always think Sean Chamel for Goku and Chris Sabat for Vegeta. That's
yeah.
just kind of how it is
Yeah.
naturally for me.
Yeah, like
Um,
whenever I hear the Japanese version of Goku, it always just makes my head turn like, what?
yeah, I
Yeah, he
know.
sounds like he's
So
like
weird.
literally
And
voiced by an old woman.
it's been the same actress ever since the beginning, and I find that nuts. And she not only does she voice Goku, but she voices Gohan, she voices
Yeah.
Goten, she voices everyone in the family. So it's like, wow.
So
And then there
one woman show,
is
I should
also
say.
yeah, seriously. But it's also interesting too because this will probably segue into the later stuff too. But like if you're like for me, when it comes to video games that have like anime feelings to them, like especially RPGs, JRPGs, I should say, um, they tend to have dub actors too, like for there as well, like the
Mm,
ones that are in the dub animes.
yeah.
And for some reason, I tend to like to play JRPGs English dubs. I don't usually play them
Yeah,
with the
me
Japanese.
too. I could not like stand it, especially for certain games where like a good example would be like Muso games where there's talking while you're fighting. Like when it's in Japanese,
Yeah.
it just throws me off cuz I'm like trying to read text while I'm fighting. I'm like, god damn it. Why didn't you put it in English dub? Why?
Like I remember I was trying to play Nino no Kuni in Japanese because I was just like I like watching Ghibli films in Japanese, so let me just do that. And there'd be parts where I'm playing the game and I'm hearing the Japanese while trying to play, and it's so weird to disconnect that. It's just like, oh god, I got to read this and then play and do the commands,
Yeah.
and it just kind of like it gets to too much times.
Yeah.
But why I brought that up is just because not only from the dubs that I've seen, but also from the dub games I played, I do like I've realized there's some actors I like and whatnot from the dub community, and I always like hearing them. Like I can one of my biggest examples I can always think of is Crispin Freeman is one of my more favorite dub actors,
Yeah.
and so I always have an effect like a an immediately like interest if I find there's an anime and he's in it. Like I'm like, oh yeah, let me see how it is because I just tend to like how he does this stuff. Um,
Mm,
so I think it really just again kind of just depends on what you've been exposed to, what you have the interest for, what you're willing for. It
yeah.
all really just comes down to that, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I would say with dubs, like I feel the same way about like dubbed anything in video game land. The only thing like I would the only series I play that's like Japanese that I don't like that I do not play dubbed is Yakuza, and that's because there isn't even an
Yeah, because there
option.
isn't any. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just like and in a way I kind of like it like that because it's like watching an imported, you know, gangster
Yakuza.
like
Oh god, the
yeah.
Yakuza's. I've only played Zero, but that was a fun ass game.
Yeah, the
Uh,
Yakuza games are fucking great, man.
and I think honestly, just the fact that they are Japanese just kind of adds to the really goofiness.
Yeah.
So
There's some like hilariously goofy moments. I remember in Yakuza 3, some of the wild shit that happens in that game. Like in like there's this one scene, it's just this gag quest, right? It's this gag side quest where you're being chased around by this male drag queen, and like and the quest is interesting because it kind of becomes active and stops being active at its own like rate. So like you'll take on the quest and you'll also just be doing other stuff on the side, and then the quest will just start up on its own again. So like
wow,
the whole thing is like you're as Kiryu, you'll run into like the drag queen, and then it'll start like chasing you around fucking town, and the quest and like the little like mini game is just you're basically just running from him like the entire time around town. Or
my god, that sounds so Yakuza.
yeah, it's
Like,
very Yakuza, right? And the whole quest comes to a head when you come across like a female crossdresser who's dressed as a dude, and then it turns out that that's actually like she's actually in a relationship with the other crossdresser, and the two of them just hook up, and then Kiryu's like, I guess all's well that ends well,
oh,
right?
there we go. It's all tied up nicely now.
Yeah.
I love that one of the quests. Not to go too far in the tangent, but I love one of the quests in freaking Yakuza Zero is pretty because Yakuza Zero takes place back in like the
Yeah,
80s.
yeah, the 80s.
Um, one of the quests revolves around a lot of the infamous stuff that was going around the time when Dragon Quest IV came out,
Uh,
and kids would get bullied for their copies of the
oh, I've
game.
heard of that. Yeah,
Yes, and
it's
so kids would
wild.
buy the game, and then other kids would bully him and just steal them because it was so hard to get and it was so big. And there's a quest that revolves around that, and it just keeps going up the chain. Like you find a kid who gets like hoodwinked by like a group of delinquents, and then he gets stolen. Like they get stolen by like other people, and then they get stolen by this one guy who's like this big boss dude, and you beat him. And then you find out he was trying to steal it for his son, and then you find out that son was the original kid in the beginning.
Oh, damn.
So
Yeah, it
it just
comes
kind of
full
like,
circle.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I just thought that was hilarious. I'm like, oh my god, they're making a joke about this
yeah, like that's
freaking problem that was going on back then. It's just
yeah,
hilarious.
it's yep, that's Yakuza. Freaking love that series. God
Oh, but
damn.
one other thing I wanted to say about the sub dub thing
Yeah,
is I also think it depends too on source material, cuz and I'm not talking about manga or anything cuz you know that they don't have voices there, so it's just
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
they make it up. But if you're somebody like me and you know there's probably cases like this for you too. Um if you play something like a visual novel first, where the language is only Japanese, so you know you're playing the game and you're used to the Japanese language, I cannot, for the life of me, then watch a dub of that because you're so used to it that when you go to watch like the anime adaptation to see how it is, to immediately then get the like the lines you've been hearing for like what 40 plus hours and you're so used to, then switch and go to something that you do not like associate with that character at
oh,
all. I
Whiplash.
I cannot do that for the life of me. And I
Yeah,
always feel bad for like my friends, you know, like Shane Carlos, because there'll be times where they want to watch it dubbed because they just kind of prefer it that way, and I'm just like, I'm sorry guys, I can't do it. It is too hard for me to do it.
yeah, I can see that for whatever reason. I guess it's just like whatever you're used to is just like whatever becomes ingrained for that specific series. Like you just can't not watch it like that. Like for me, like for me when I'm watching like Aurica 7, right? It's one of my favorite series ever. like
Yeah.
favorite anime, right? And I cannot watch it subbed because I first started watching it dubbed, and I was just so attached to the dub of that series.
Yeah, it just kind of happens, it always seems.
Yeah,
Like you kind of like associate those voices with characters, and then to hear it be very opposite and different is creates that sort of disconnect.
yeah.
And I know it's happened to me with dubs too. Like, I know it might be a bit controversial, but I don't really care. I personally enjoyed the dubs in the Danganronpa games. Like, I thought they were
Uh
fitting for the games. I know there's a lot of people out there who think the dubs suck, but you know, I think
I played the Danganronpa games in dubbed, so like, or like
yeah,
the one I did play, which is just Danganronpa one. But yeah, like I played it in that, and I actually liked the dubs.
yeah.
Video
Like I
games.
enjoy it.
You go ahead.
And I did like when I bought the PS4 version. When I was replaying a little bit of one, I tried to go to Japanese because I was like, let me listen to a Japanese, and like there came to a point where I just had to switch it back to English because I just could not like keep going because it
Yeah,
just felt so different.
this felt
Um,
wrong.
yeah, it did because I think Danganronpa, and it like always depends. Like this is kind of goes back to it depends on what the genre is of it too.
Yeah,
Because
it's really
to me,
wordy, right? So
yes, Danganronpa is really wordy, and it's also very in your face but it's a very cultural way. And what I mean by that is like you'll have characters like Mondo who, you know, obviously in the Japanese version he's like the delinquent, is the
yeah,
hore kind of guy.
yeah,
Uh, but to me, how they did the English version was the equivalent of that in America, which is just some guy who always swears his head off.
yeah.
So to always hear him just always be like, "Well, fuck off" and stuff like that, I can't like look at him and not think that all the time because I always just associate him as a vulgar man. And then you go to the Japanese and you just miss it. You're just like, oh, I miss that part of him. So
Yeah. Yep. It just feels wrong.
yeah, it
That's
does.
yeah. Like anything I play for some reason, like I think video games don't have like the same voice actor issue as like anime.
Yeah, because they usually are able to like just stick by whatever pace they want.
Yeah.
Because usually it's like text box stuff, or at least the lip movement in games aren't accurate to the characters much anyway. So they kind of just can fit it in there, and it's not as big of an issue.
Yeah.
Or they just don't even care. I've seen that plenty of times.
Oh
But
yeah, I've seen that. Especially with
so
like
like
low budget games.
yeah. So yeah, I agree. I don't really think it's usually an issue as much. Um, Maybe it's just also just kind of how I'm used to it too. That really just kind of depends.
Hmm. Gotcha. Like man, what's a oh yeah, I was just thinking about like certain like games, blah, particularly like the Cold Steel games for like the Trail series, and thinking
Hmm.
about like the voice acting in those games. And like I know you haven't played them yet, but like
I've played a little bit of the
oh yeah,
first
you
game,
played a little bit of the
but I
first one.
mean, don't ask me like details because I don't
Yeah,
fucking know. All I remember is freaking. I think it was Ryan falling on what's her face's boobs, and like there was shit about that. And unlike anime where that usually is a gag and then it's just over, they actually stuck with that for a while. Like that was like a tension between the two, and eventually they had to apologize to come to an understanding. I'm like, oh my god, this actually feels
yeah, it feels
like a
realistic.
real
Yeah,
resolution to
exactly.
it.
Exactly, and it plays into Elisa's like whole character, and I
Yeah.
like how she's like, oh yeah, I'm stubborn, even though she know like, oh, it's no big deal, it was an accident and all that shit. It
But that
feels
just
like something that would actually happen.
Yeah, it just fucks with my head because I'm so used to the trope of oh no pervert, and then it just kind of
Slap,
continues on, and
and
she's just
then yeah, everybody's
yeah. But
cool.
no, they actually fix that, and then they're all good. It's just like oh okay
Yeah,
wow.
they actually have to fucking apologize. That's one of the things about Cold Steel, like not just Cold Steel, but like Trails, is that generally speaking, like I feel like the Trails series, and I've heard other people say this, and I kind of agree. Like they give their characters, like I feel like both female, both their female and also even like their male characters, in my opinion, they give their characters like a lot of respect, and I
Oh
can
hell yeah,
appreciate
I would
that.
agree.
Yeah.
And I could comment on that because I'm playing the series right now. So
Yep.
now I get to date this video by saying that. Whatever.
Date this. Yeah, we date it. Well, yeah, I feel like, well, that's the kind of thing with like podcasts in general, is they can get like really dated, but in a interesting way, because now it kind of becomes a time capsule. Whenever I hear like, oh yeah, now this video is dated, I also think of it as more of like, oh yeah, well, it's more of like a time capsule now. Now we can like look back at this like, 2 years ago and be like, holy shit, remember that?
Yeah, exactly. Remember when I said that? Wow, I don't agree with that at all. What the hell was I thinking?
Yep.
Yeah, those kind of
Yep.
points.
Yeah, but yeah, back to like the voice acting in those games. Uh, in the actual like voice acted scenes, again, like there's so many different voice actors. I think that I kind of discovered just from playing certain like freaking games, particularly like these.
If I remember correctly, I don't think I recognized any actors from Cold Steel from
Oh yeah,
the memory I had. I think they were all fairly new people.
yeah, like
At
the
least for the
main.
dub. I'm not talking about the sub
Yeah,
here. Yeah.
like the dub, like the person who plays the lead, Reen. Um, I actually follow him on Twitter. He's actually pretty fucking hilarious. But he's done Mishima from Persona 5, and what's his face from Breath of the Wild, the bird person, Birdman.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't played it yet.
Oh, okay. I guess we'll just like, oh yeah, audience, you know what I mean. The people who've played Breath of the Wild
Who
all the
is
way through,
Bird Boy?
the blue bird man person that like died and shit.
Oh, spoilers.
No, like at the very beginning of the story, you already know
Oh,
they're
okay.
all dead. It's like common knowledge, and like it's basically like finding out like it's like Reen, not Reen, fuck. It's like Link's former allies who died like 500. I think it was like 500. Forget. I fuck it. Like basically, they're already dead, right?
Okay. Well, I hear the term "dead" in fiction, and everybody just usually associates that with some sort of spoiler. So,
Yeah, yeah.
my
I
apologies.
get what I get what you're saying. Yeah, like I like whenever. Yeah, I completely get what you're saying. I'm trying to be as careful as possible with that, which usually sometimes I slip, but like this time I'm like, no, no, no. Like
No, 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 no,
they
no.
were
I'm gonna
dead at the very
stand
beginning of
by.
the game. Yep. But
You are not catching me on this one, Nick. God damn it.
yeah, like the voice acting definitely like a lot of new voices, in my opinion. Like not all of them were like the same particular people, and I think that's something I really like to see. And I
Yeah,
guess this is just something that video games have over like just regular anime.
yeah, because games are usually tied to I don't really know how the very specifics of it, but they're not as tight as they are with anime. Like
Yeah,
where an anime will be picked up by a studio, whether it be like Sentai Filmworks here or Funimation or any of them. And within those groups, they have generally their set of voice actors that they usually just pick from. So they're kind of limited in that way. While with video games,
yeah, there's
it really
auditions
just
and
comes
shit.
like, yeah, it comes from whatever the publishers want and stuff like that. And they just kind of probably go to certain subgroups and ask them stuff
Yeah,
like that. So
yeah.
that was a horrible way to explain it, but I mean,
It's fine.
I
It's
don't.
fine.
I'm
Like
sorry, I don't know the complete
we're
details. But
we're
yeah.
all we're all learning, right? This is like it's not your first time on a podcast, but it's your first time you've had to talk as much, since it's just me and you.
Yeah, since it's just two people.
Yeah, it's just two people. We just got to go back and forth. Um, so like, fuck. let's go on to like translations because I already mentioned Cold Steel 3, which is being like
Just like the main focal
like the
point, yeah.
main thing that got me to make this, which is weird because I'm not like a video game channel, but this is the Ocha Zone. Damn it, I get to talk about whatever the fuck I want.
We're otaku. And we so happen to be otaku of not
Yeah.
only anime, but also video games. So
Yep. So yeah, Cold Steel 3 it just got announced like this. Well, yeah, last week I should say technically. Yeah,
hooray!
like just got released after like 2 to 3 fucking years of waiting. We're going into rant mode here. Going into rant mode. So buckle up. Like after 2 to 3 years of fucking waiting for that game to show up, like we finally get news confirming, oh, like Nippon Ichi Software's America is gonna be doing the localization, and we're like, okay, we're getting the. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're getting the game now, even though like with Nippon Ichi Software, like they have messed up before in the past, but I'm thinking, oh wow, even though they've messed up, they know they've messed up. They've corrected the error on the last thing they have done. And they're getting people on board who have experience doing this. So it looks like they're taking this very seriously and they're trying to do their best. But like the entire fucking Trails community, they fucking flipped. Like, holy shit, you've got people telling them to go fuck themselves. And in my head, I'm like, my God, have you ever met a community so fucking ungrateful? Like,
Yeah.
this is a game I'm thinking to myself. I remember being kind of sad that the game didn't get localized like a couple months ago and thinking, man, at the earliest we would get this game like 2020 or 2021 if just an announcement
Hmm.
of the game being like coming to this side of the world. And then you got these guys, they're like, we're finally getting the game, and these guys are just like, no, fuck you, how dare you, why can't it be my precious Xseed? And it's like, guys, come on, come on, like this is it's a niche game, right? It does not have that huge of a following in the West. So the fact that it's getting even this much priority is a good thing. It means like Falcom, which is the company that like made the original game, the indie studio in Japan.
Hmm.
Falcom, like they said, they're trying to like break into the Western market. They're trying like harder than before. So that's a good thing to fucking hear. And this is their move. They're trying to get like a bigger studio like Nippon Ichi Software to like handle localizations now. That way they don't that way they don't have like the huge gap in between like in between localizations. Because in my opinion, because again, like Nick can vouch for this because again he's playing the games, like the Trail series is fucking great. It's a really really fucking good JRPG series. And I guarantee that like if a lot of people got the chance to play it, they would fucking love this series and it would actually be popular on this side.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, but
Yeah.
I was just gonna chime in saying, no, yeah, it's fantastic, and I think honestly, probably one of the biggest deterrents of why so many people probably haven't played it is just because of its access.
Yeah.
Like they were limited to the PSP originally. The first game
Yeah,
was,
definitely.
which not a lot of people had, and then they eventually, ported it to PC.
Yeah.
And while definitely that's bigger there, that's still not as big as like what typically a lot of JRPG players play on, which is home consoles.
Yeah.
Um, so making way onto that, I think will definitely open it itself up more.
Yeah, definitely. Like getting onto like home consoles and actually like getting onto different platforms because before they weren't on Steam or anything like that. And of course like the people at Falcom have said like, oh, if Steam had existed back in the day, we probably would have had like they probably would have had it on the more platforms. And they're just you know they're trying to like get it out there.
Yeah.
But Yeah, like access is like a big thing, and they're just trying to open up. They're trying to get it out there and make it so that as many people can access the games as possible. So, which is why you're seeing like re-releases of Cold Steel for PlayStation 4. Yeah, like
Which
if
is very needed because
yeah,
otherwise it was on the Vita, which
yeah, it was
again nobody
yeah
has.
on
Well,
the
I say that,
Vita,
but I have one. But
yeah on
that's
the
beside the point.
yeah yeah on the Vita or the PlayStation
Also,
3,
Steam.
yeah, or Steam.
Oh yeah, I always forget they were on
Yeah,
PlayStation
like they
3, but they
originally.
released it like a console late. Like everybody has a PlayStation 4 now, and they're like,
Yeah, yeah.
PlayStation 3?
It's like PlayStation 3, maybe. Like you could get it on here. It's like yeah, but now they're like doing the upgraded versions. I'm just saying, like, gosh damn it, like those games, I did not think we were gonna get them this fucking early, and like for like Cold Steel 3, I did not think we were gonna get that game fucking early, and now fucking motherfuckers are bitching about it because it wasn't
Yeah.
like their precious Xseed doing the localization. I'm like, guys, come on. Come on. Like I just give them a second chance. I know that's like extremely taboo in like the gaming community to give people second chances unless you're EA, in which case you get to like, you get to fuck people as much as you want. But
Fucking yeah.
yeah, but yeah, like I'm just saying, like they look like they have learned their lesson. Just give them another chance, and if they fuck up, then you can like raise hell and tell them to go fuck themselves. But just wait and see. And then you have people online who are like going crazy and shit. Let me tell you another like story, and it happened like a little late last year, right? With with the Trails community, right? On in Xseed, you have like two translators, right? And they actually left around at the same time. These two translators were like a really big deal for like localizing the Trails games, right? They did a lot of work into, context and all this other shit, and like, making sure everything was tight and Gucci. And when they left, because they have other ambitions and dreams. Like one dude wants to like, teach English in Japan, and live in Japan. He basically has like Nick's dream, right here.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And he's like, yeah, like I actually just want to he's like, yeah, I just actually just want to go to Japan and do this thing, and like, move on and actually head there. And the guy's like, just honestly like, oh yeah, I'm just trying to follow my dreams. So I'm like, yeah, just wish the guy good luck, and
And thank
whatnot.
him for the work he's done.
Yeah, like, and generally speaking, there are a lot of people who are cool about it, but there are also a lot of people who are freaking the fuck out. Like, oh, is the Trail series dead in the West? And I'm just like, what kind of like hyperbolic bullshit is this? Like, two translators leave, and all of a sudden people lose their shit and are acting like it's the end of the fucking world. Like old talent leaves, but new talent, or people who are already there, can still like pick up the slack. And I just thought it was like insane, like just the reaction people were having. It was such an over the top reaction to people going and leaving to like actually pursue, the things they wanted in the future.
Yeah. I think
It's
that honestly, I'd probably cope that up more to like that fear of change,
yeah, fear
because
of
it's kind of
change.
that fear of the unknown of like, oh my god, like they did such a good job, and now we have to do like put up with something else that could be possibly worse, and
Mm.
they don't want to have to think about, oh god, like, or they don't want to have to. Well, they will start feeling anxious about kind of that aspect of maybe it won't be as up to that level, or maybe it will be. Who knows?
Yeah, like
Oh, I do have one question though.
yeah.
And I know you've talked about this for a while, so it's a bit weird for me to come in now. But do you mind like going briefly into what the whole negativity that was going around NISA was? Because I'm not completely
Oh, I forgot
up
to.
to the details of
Yeah,
that.
I forgot
I
to
think I
mention.
remember them saying, was it about like Eve 7 or something, or was it Eve's 8?
Yeah,
game is it?
Ys 8. It was Ys
Okay.
8. Like, so again, another Falcom game for my audience. Like, it's another Falcom game called Ys 8. And it released 2017, late 2017, I believe.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
fairly recent.
yeah, I actually own it, but I haven't played it because I want to go through like the other, Ys games up to that
Yeah,
point.
same.
And and NIS America, they fucked up. They actually like I've actually seen like a pretty strong case for them, like, really messing up. Like, this is like when it first released. They've since corrected a lot of this stuff from what I've heard, but like when it first dropped and released, there was like a lot of issues with how it was translated and some localization stuff, like bugs and whatnot. So like I understand, so which is why which is why people, well, it's not the only reason, since there's like another, there's other instances before that with other games of just like screw ups before, but like it was a big deal because of just the shit storm the community the community actually like put forth, and in my opinion rightfully so, because they did kind of mess up. And from what I've heard, like, you've had, it actually went all the way up to like the corporate side of things, where you had people who are the presidents of like the certain of the companies had to like come down and actually apologize and fix the shit. It was a pretty big disaster for Miss America as far as just their reputation as a localizer.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember hearing some stuff about it, but I didn't I didn't know how big it was or anything. Because we still talk about them, but in the grand scheme of a lot of other big game companies, they're still very niche and small.
Oh
So
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, like they're
but I mean, that's still good to get that kind of
yeah,
clarification.
they're
You,
they're not as like niche as they used to be, because again, I remember back in the day when like nobody fucking knew who these guys were. Still kind of weird to think that like in the early 2000s, like most of their games were actually like localized by Atlas. Yeah, like Atlas USA, like, or was the Atlas, did Atlas have a USA branch back then? They must have to do localization, but like whatever. Basically, Atlas did the localization for those games, which is why a lot of early Disgaea copies of like Disgaea or La Policia Tactics or any of those old Nipponichi software games, all of those have like, the sky, the not the sky, the Atlas, stamp on them, which kind of worked for both Atlas and Nipponichi Soft, because it spread Atlas's name kind of further throughout the West, and also got Nipponichi Software publicity to where they could actually found their own like US branch and start releasing shit. And then Nipponichi Software kind of continues the weird cycle by also becoming their own like, localizer of other, games, like compile heart games, like fucking I think like Mugen Souls, I believe, was one game like that. But yeah, it's basically this weird chain of just localizations and whatnot.
yeah, that's pretty interesting though.
Yeah, it really is interesting. And nowadays, like, they're a lot more well known. But
Yeah,
obviously they're no fucking Square Enix, but they're still like, fairly much more well known than like a lot of other, say, like smaller JRPG, making companies.
yeah,
The sheer amount of like, properties that have not been licensed that are just actually like really fucking cool. Like, fuck, like with like for example, some of like the Alice Soft stuff, like like rants and some other stuff that I, again, like, I'm pretty new to like Alice Soft shit myself, so again, like, but like a lot of the stuff there is like really cool and interesting, and it has not be and it had and a lot of it has not been like localized. So people who want to play something like Sengoku Rants, they have to like jump through fucking hoops and like pirate that shit to like
Yeah,
get
they
to
got to do
play.
the old school style of
Yes.
finding the copy of the Japanese copy, getting the
Yeah.
patches, or getting all that fun stuff.
Yeah, like I love the idea of like this weird difference between the way otakus play games in Japan versus the way they play games in the States or like the West, in the sense that in Japan, because everything is there in your home country, you don't have
Just
to
buy it.
yeah, you just buy it. You don't have to jump through all these fucking hoops to get the goddamn games, right? It's just there. You just go down to the fucking store. Hopefully you don't get run over like fucking Kazuma and Konosuba, but like you just
Or you
go.
don't get your game stolen
Yeah, you don't get your
by
game stolen.
bullies.
Yeah, exactly. You just go down to the store and buy the fucking game. Here, like, there's so much shit that never hits, the Western shore. So you have to take to the high seas and pirate that shit. So
Yeah,
so in a weird roundabout way, when you become an otaku and you start getting into like more obscure, games that like have not been released and shit, you have to learn shit about computers. Not like become an expert or anything, just like basic stuff with like files and downloading stuff and whatnot. Like how to operate a computer, as far as like not how to like fuck with a computer as far as like on a technical level, but just how to operate a computer on a higher level than like some
than
people.
your
Yeah,
average.
yeah,
Yeah,
your average Joe. Like there's shit that some there's shit that like a lot of people like I know from like my family who are just like, oh, how do you do this XYZ, in terms of just like accessing certain parts of their computer or whatnot, that I have to like, oh yeah, I have to like do like, yeah, just do this and that and that. And to me, it just feels normal now because I've had to like jump through all those fucking hoops to like play
you got to go
obscure
find a
games.
proper site. You got to get a download. Then you got to split the downloads into different parts because they're
Yeah.
separated into different parts. You got to find a folder to put them all in. Then you got to go find the patch. You got to put there. You got to get the right software to put the patch in the game. You got to know where to put. Yeah, it's just all
Yeah.
that fun
Oh my
stuff.
god. I have to tell you my homebrew story because I haven't told too many people about this. I've told them like tangentially. Oh yeah, I did like a homebrew PSP and all that shit. But I haven't told like the full fucking story, like the pirating saga of like young 14-year-old, I believe, Romano, or yeah, that's my real name, by the way. I don't care. But yeah. But yeah, fuck. Jeez. Where to start? Okay, so yeah, like basically when I was a kid, I got like a freaking memory card and some like stuff for my PSP on Christmas, and I was just like, how can I make use of this to the best of my ability? So like in a weird roundabout events, I ended up starting to pirate shit. So before I got those things, I was actually in Jamaica, obviously where I was born, um just kind of on vacation because it was summer break and whatnot. And there's like this game shop in a little city area called Mandeville, around where my family's from, right? And in this shop, right, they can actually, you could just actually just get a guy to fucking homebrew like stuff for you, right? So I gave the guy the thing. He's like, oh yeah, we'll just do it. And he homebrewed the whole thing and he gave it back to me. He's like, and I was like, holy shit. So now I had that, and he's like, yeah, I just he put Disgaea 2 and fucking Dissidia on it, and I was like, oh shit. So then after I went back to America, I was like, oh man, I can actually just stick like files and do a bunch of crazy shit and just get a bunch of games on it, because this is around the time where I think they're getting rid of like they were actually like starting to get rid of like PS copies of PSP games and stuff, and
I
And
barely ever remember those being in the shelves,
yeah,
honestly.
yeah, yeah, definitely. They were getting rid of the copies of that stuff, and also I was a broke ass fucking you know,
Like every 14-year-old
yeah, every
is.
14-year-old. I was a broke ass 14-year-old kid, and I was like, "Oh yeah, who fucking cares? Let's just do it." So I just went online and started like, pirating a bunch of fucking games, which is how I first played Persona 2. I ended up getting that and a bunch of other shit. And also, I also around the time started to read visual novels. That's how I first touched um the original Fate Stay Night, because I was aware of Fates at the time, because again I read like the manga adaptation of the Fate route and stuff like that, but I hadn't and also like Tsukihime and stuff like that, and I figured out, oh yeah, visual novels, that's a thing, let's go do that. And back then it was way easier to just fucking to get your hands on like visual novel stuff, like if like as far as just like pirating it. Nowadays it's a bit
Yeah,
more difficult because there aren't as many
because they're
sites, but
actually releasing them here, so there's
yeah,
much more legal stuff going
yeah,
on,
there's a lot more
which
legal
is
shit
great.
going on.
But that
Yeah,
also kind of,
yeah,
for those ones that obviously aren't getting over here, or at least not very fast anytime soon.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it kind of throws a little bit of a monkey wrench in that. But yeah, I started, pirating that shit, and that's how I got started on like my fucking quest to do stuff. So in a bizarre roundabout way, I'd been doing shit like this since I was like 14, but I didn't realize that it was like a really common thing like fucking otakus did in the West, because they just could not get their hands on this shit legally. But
Someone
yeah,
should make a documentary series just talking about how the otaku culture had to develop over here with our limited access. And I'm not just talking about like more recent times, but there's some people I watch on YouTube who are older, and like I'm talking about, like, they were into anime and this stuff back in the 80s and 90s,
mm,
and they had to like get like hard to get VHS copies of Japanese like from there, and
mm.
like, people that would record them, and then get them over into
Yeah, like
the
this fucking roundabout crazy. Like it sounds like something like in the night. It sounds like 1920s bootlegging
yeah.
shit. Like that's what it sounds like. It's
Freaking
hilarious.
underground facilities where they're just free
Like
bringing
making
over
moon
these
sound.
illegal copies of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, it's freaking hilarious. But yeah, like it shows that, people will go to extreme lengths to get shit they like. And just like providing that service, like you can make fucking money doing that, being able to provide the service. Because a
Yeah.
lot of times, like the reason why stuff doesn't come over here, as far as like localizations, it's a combination of the studios not having the money to like go abroad with their product, or just not knowing whether there's a consumer demand for this stuff.
Yeah.
Nowadays you're seeing it like become more common for this stuff to come over, because like again, otaku culture, it's become like people have become a lot more aware of like how much of a global thing it is now,
Hmm.
on a level inside of Japan. Like one of the most interesting videos I remember watching was by this Japanese YouTuber by the name of Yuta. Like if you want, you could, like, he's on YouTube right now. I would recommend subscribing to him if you're like interested in Japanese culture and stuff. He's a pretty cool guy. But yeah, he made a video talking about how, oh yeah, he when he grew up, he didn't know that like Americans and like people outside of Japan watched stuff like anime, because like
Which is
it
really funny to think about because
yeah
that's
it's
really true.
yeah, like it, and he describes it as like, hey, like think of it like this. It's like if you grew up in like the States and stuff, stuff like, think you're thinking about like stuff in the West, like Harry Potter, or stuff like let's say the Elder Scrolls games, or Song of Fire and Ice and stuff like that. You don't really
Yeah.
think of people in like non-Western countries like reading stuff like that, but like it's like yeah they're but it's like yeah people from other countries that are non-Western do read those like series or watch those things, or like a lot of American movies get like get subtitled and they go to a ton of different places around the world. So it's like a really interesting thing, but we don't personally like think about it here in the West. We just like in America we don't think about it like that. Like it's just kind of a thing for us where we think, oh, it's just it's the American thing, where it's just a thing in our culture. We don't really think about it as like on a global scale. But like that's kind of like the way he described it for like Japanese people when it comes to anime. But nowadays, because anime has just become a lot more widespread, like and like knowledge of like okay, people in these other countries are starting to like recognize it as like a big medium, especially in like Asia, surprisingly. Like in other places in Asia, that's why we're getting like Chinese anime now.
Yeah.
I
Or
I
what are they called? The technically what they call like the manga that's from like other like
yeah.
Asian countries, like Korean
Oh yeah, I've read
manga.
some
I
Korean
forgot what
stuff
they're
too.
called, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember there were like two Korean series I've read, by this one dude who's like was pretty talented artist, but yeah, like one was like Freezing, which again I'm not gonna give my opinion on the overall series, but like I didn't actually realize it was done by like a Korean guy until I read his like name, because again I was just reading the series and I was like, oh man, it's just manga. I was in this phase where I just like jumped from manga to manga and I was just reading a ton of different shit. So with that I just kind of read the series and it was just like, oh yeah, this is just like it's just like any other anime stuff. And then I didn't realize, oh shit, this is actually made in Korea. What? Fuck. And then we have like the unironic Chinese animes that have been coming out. Like there's this one that's basically I forget the name of it, but it's described as basically SAO, but like like much better animated and Chinese.
Uh-huh. I've seen like, people talk about that, but I
Yeah.
haven't seen anything else on it.
Yeah. I haven't seen it either. I've seen like videos on it. What else? What's another one? I remember seeing like a little bit of the first episode of a series called To Be a Heroine or To Be a Heroine, where it's like Chinese, and that threw me for a fucking loop, because when I first picked it up, I was like, oh, it's just a. I thought, oh, it was just gonna be like a regular Japanese thing, right? I just watched the first episode, and when the main heroine started talking, I had a moment where I was like, what? Because I immediately went, oh wait, this is Chinese, what? Because again, like for those of you who don't know, my dad, he has a ton of freaking Chinese movies and stuff like that, so I know Chinese when I hear it. So like to me, I was like, oh wait, this is Chinese. What the fuck? And like, oh, I guess this is an unironic Chinese anime. But yeah, that's somehow we got to like somehow we've gotten to like Chinese anime.
Yeah,
Like
that's
what?
always how it happened. We went from a Jamaican man who freaking pretty much broke into your PSP and just
Yeah, homebrewed my PSP
to
until I could
Chinese anime.
Chinese anime. But that's kind of what I like about some podcasts is kind of jumping from topic to topic and ending up on these wild stories. Yeah, I kind of want it to be like this a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Um
Oh, but I remember when you were saying so I think the whole thing we can pretty much say by doing this is I feel like whenever we do get a company nowadays that does announce that they're doing a localization, I don't. I think we should just be in general at least consider it because oh my god, they're at least gonna attempt to bring it over here now. We don't have to go through these backwards ways of just getting it.
Yeah. Yep. Like, thank God for stuff like thank God for stuff like Manga Gamer now.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just so nice that there's a lot of smaller companies that
Yeah.
go out of their way to get a lot of these games that
Yeah.
we would never be able to
Yeah,
experience
they
or
would
just
never
never
see the fucking
find
light
on
of
our
day.
own without them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I really appreciate those companies cuz like you like back in the day, like you wouldn't see this kind of shit, but I think it's just a byproduct of the era we live in a
Yeah.
way. Like at first I was just like, oh man, the economy, what's gonna happen, but I'm starting to see like, oh, things are actually kind of like working out in its own weird way, because I guess it's just like, again, I bring this guy up all the time, but like Gary Vee said, because one of the things he says is like, oh yeah, this is actually like, because of the internet and shit, like this era we live in, like the opportunity to like do shit and create and like make a profit or start like small businesses has actually like exponentially increased. And
Yep.
I was like, yeah, that is true, because now you have so many small businesses, profiting off something like anime, which is interesting because like, you wouldn't think of anime stuff for like, video game localizers or other things like that as being like particularly profitable as a storefront, but when you run it from the internet, you can aggregate so much more, you can get so much more people from all over the place to like come and see your shit, which is one thing I've actually been considering maybe doing in the future, is like opening my own like fucking shop and doing localization stuff, because I'm thinking, oh man, that seems like cool, because I'm into like all the animes and all this shit, and maybe my calling is to like further spread and propagate it across
Yeah,
the
maybe.
West. Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, yeah, honestly, that's just kind of how you find things. Just experiment and think on whatever interests you got. But um, but yeah, it's just we live in a day and age now where we're just so connected, more so than we've ever been in prior history. That you can find people that have interests outside of where you'd expect. Like
Yeah,
the Japanese market only really expected anime and that kind of stuff to really only be prevalent there because they're like, oh, the Americans are fine with their Disney stuff. They probably don't care about ours because they will think ours is weird or different because
yeah,
different cultures and stuff. And then they're like, oh shit, there actually is a lot of people over there that like it. And then
yep,
from there, you get companies that help bring it over here to make a profit for both, and just kind of spreads and makes all sorts of new companies and gets products and
yeah,
fictional work everywhere that you would never really expected
yeah.
before. And
It really is a growing industry and market. And
yeah,
what I want to happen in the future, and this is it's kind of weird, but I definitely would really like it if this happened. It would be an interesting like phenomenon in general, but what I would think would be cool would happen is like in Asia in particular, is if anime just spreads to the point where it just becomes like a common thing in a bunch of different like Asian countries. That way we have like a lot more, we have also lots of like creativity coming from so many different places, and it would also alleviate some of the stress on the Japanese market
yeah,
for like producing like a lot of anime, because one of the things in Japan is just like the
it's
labor.
like it's quantity over quality
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
like, yeah, quantity over quality at the moment. So yeah, who knows? We'll see. Hopefully that happens and it like spreads and shit. In the West, I don't think like anime will like become, like, anime will obviously become like way more popular, as it's still like a growing thing,
Yeah.
over here, but there's also like opposition because more Western cartoon, bro. That
Yeah,
stuff.
it's because it's from somebody somewhere else, so
Yeah,
that kind of difference of culture always not so much creates a barrier, but so like it doesn't make it so everything will come over here.
yeah, yeah. Like it, like in you'd be surprised, especially like with from what I've noticed, especially with like the artsy fartsy types, specifically like people who draw. There's this weird tribalistic antagonism to like anime, and I've always thought that was like fucking bizarre and
Oh
weird.
yeah, I can relate to that because I had a an art teacher in high school who
Yeah,
was very much just didn't like the anime art style, like
yeah,
the that kind of style. And I remember I think his reasoning for why is because he usually argue that a lot of the times it's kind of the same way, or the proportions would be um make it so characters feel very cheaply made and stuff like that.
well, yeah. That's like that's kind of like with limited animation. Like is like the trade off with like limited animation versus the type of animation you see in like the West. And I think this is something that this might be just a cultural disconnect, but like generally speaking, the whole trade off is that you have less obviously you have less strong animation except for like with Sakuga and stuff like that, but there's a lot more detail in like backgrounds and stuff like that. If you've
Mhm.
noticed, there's a lot more detail, and because
Yeah.
of that, like it's a lot more expensive. It would be a lot more expensive to go all crazy with the animation. So
Yeah.
instead it's a lot more about like capturing like really good, really intense and fluid, like really intense and nice like visuals in your own way, not necessarily by being extremely fluid with animation, but like by but with like a combination of art and just like clever little tricks while also trying to like maintain a low cost. In the West, like Western animation or Western animators tend to really value like fluid animation and like lots of motion and movement and
Mhm.
like flowing and whatnot. And well, the thing in my mind, it's also one of the reasons why I think that animation in the West, it's like it's not very detailed. The art style itself is very like, as far as like animation goes, it can be like very cartoonish or minimalistic in nature. Well, yeah, if you're gonna like animate a lot, or you're gonna put a lot of energy into creating fluid motion, it's a lot easier to animate if everything is a lot more simplistic. So that's like the trade-off there. And with animators, because everything's a bit more simplistic in the West, like little quirks or weird like little goofiness, or just the
Why are
difference
their
in,
eyes so big?
yeah, like the aesthetics. The aesthetics are just really different, and it's very much like a cultural thing based on
Mhm.
that. But like, with the thing that really annoys me about like people in the West who like shit on anime is that like it's generally like this weird like, oh yeah, our thing is better because of XYZ reason. And it's like it's not a fucking competition. Why
No.
does everybody have to fight over fucking everything? But yeah, like I feel like it's that whenever I hear like artists like shit on anime, I always perceive it as that, like this weird competitive, our thing is better than your thing attitude. Like, when really you can just be like, oh, I'm not that big into anime, but
Mhm.
no, it's fine. It's like it's like you can see the merits in things without having to like shit all over them, right?
Yeah. Maybe
And
it's just the idea of you just get so sick of being exposed by it, and you just kind of want to keep pushing it away.
yeah,
That might be it too.
yeah,
Because I
I've,
think a lot of because we like going back to this teacher in
yeah,
particular, like I would assume that a lot of times because of um because he this teacher was involved with like animation and like art design stuff like that.
ah,
So it'd be people that probably use that style all the time, and you probably just get sick of seeing that style all the time.
ah,
So you tend to prefer more styles that are different than what you're used to. People trying to get outside the box. So I get that idea, but at the same time, like I think it always really depends because if you also place those labeled stigmas on anime, there's plenty of examples you can go out there where you're like, not all anime is like that.
oh
There's plenty of
yeah,
examples where
yeah,
shows are vastly different looking from others.
yeah, like
Like you can't like compare a Ghibli show to a typical light novel series.
yeah,
Like just comparing that is like comparing a Disney film to a Saturday morning cartoon. Like
yeah,
obviously there's going to be major glaring differences. It's just how the artists have to work with the limitations they have,
yeah,
or um, they utilize different aspects. There always has to be that kind of workaround in order to get
definitely.
as most out of it as you can with the amount of money and budget and all that fun stuff, that gets placed on you as you can. So,
Yeah, like one of the things I often like fuck, like I just had it. Jeez. What was it again? Artist. Fuck. Yeah, one of the things I've noticed about like a lot of artists who, or some of them, is like like some of them start out with like, oh yeah, like a sort of like for anime and stuff like that, and then they kind of like turn away from that as they get more into like the Disney stuff and whatnot, and like like a part of it is just generally the consensus idea, like the people around you in that particular community is like really into like certain specific art styles and like thoughts, and like to fit in with that you also have to like toe the party line and also agree with the, hey, this is better than this. But yeah, to go back to like your whole idea of the differences in art style and just the stereotyping of anime in general, I've definitely seen that before. You can go online and find like fucking videos of people talking shit about like anime art styles and like basically using something like the like SAO or like A1 Pictures, like the A1 Pictures style, and putting that up and basically saying, "Oh, this is all anime," right?
mhm.
Yeah, like the big old, the big old fucking the big old fucking like, yeah, this is everything that happens in anime and this is what it all looks like, right? And obviously, if you actually experience a lot of different anime and shows, you'll know that that's not the case.
Yep.
But yeah, like again with anime, a lot of people point out like, oh yeah, the big guys are like the thing with anime, the big centralizing thing. But you could also point to Western animation and see that like there's a lot of influence on there's a lot of influence on stuff like from stuff like Disney on a lot of other stuff, right? A lot of other series and a lot of other movies in the West, right? And the same is true
Yeah.
for anime. Like the reason why like there's so many like big-eyed characters is because of like the Osamu Tezuka mangas, like the original stuff with like Astro Boy or Blackjack or any of those. Like those were like the first manga to like really have like, or among the first manga to have like really large-eyed characters, and since then it's just kind of been like a domino effect of things, various things building on each other, and anime just kind of changing and evolving in its own way. So yeah, like generally, I the moral of this, or like the big the big come, I guess, of this whole
There you
discussion
go.
is that, yeah, like, fuck, people, we should all be able to just get along and like the shit we like without having to without having to say which one's better or not.
Yeah,
As that was the whole point of my subs versus dubs video. It's like not which one is better or not, just like, fuck, stop arguing over like, pointless shit.
it's all just a matter of opinion to begin with.
Yeah.
Art is subjective, so
Yeah. Yeah, fuck. This was like a this was a yeah, subs versus dubs localization translation podcast. I think most of it was about like subs and dubs and like, foreign stuff in general.
yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. I think we should probably like come to an end at this point, since we've been going for a bit, and my throat is kind of you're feeling a little weird from having talked so much. So I'm like, yeah, let's let's call it a video.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, guys, thanks for watching. I know I sound a bit different in this one because I'm just talking off the top of my fucking head, and I'm probably not gonna put any weird editing or anything into this to like take out any of the moments I I brain farted or whatever. So, yeah, this is, you're just getting the genuine, authentic Jade experience here.
Jade
Plus
gone
Nick.
raw.
All right. So, yeah, we'll see you later. Thanks for watching.
Yep. See you guys, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem, Nick. Anytime. Anytime you want to be on, just tell me.